My husband changed completely once his business took off. He didn't even try to hide his affair, openly flaunting it. When I confronted him, he sneered and said, "You're worthless. You don't contribute a thing. Be grateful I'm supporting you." I told him I'd find a job, but he just laughed, mocking, "Do whatever you want." So, I joined his parent company and quietly started planning my revenge. I'm Karen, 34, a former homemaker. My husband, Michael, 36, owns a printing company. We met at work years ago. I was in the illustration department, and he was in sales. We fell in love and married when I was 26. After we got married, Michael quit his job and pitched the idea of starting his own business. Unsure, I suggested we consult Bob, a CEO from our old workplace who later became a friend and investor. With his help, Michael and I launched the company together. In the early days, we struggled in a cramped apartment, but as the business grew, we upgraded to a high-rise condo. Then Michael asked me to quit working and focus on being a homemaker. "I'll hire someone else for illustrations," he said. "I need you to support me from home." I reluctantly agreed, leaving behind work I loved. Even Bob was disappointed but promised to support me if I ever wanted to return to illustration. At home, I found joy sharing my artwork on Instagram as a hobby. Meanwhile, Michael's business flourished, and so did our lifestyle. He splurged on a new car and designer suits, which felt excessive to me, but I dismissed it as part of his role as a business owner. Despite his busy schedule, Michael always came home for dinner, a ritual we'd promised to maintain. Over those meals, he would share his plans, and I loved being part of his dreams. But as time passed, he grew distant. He stopped discussing work with me. When I asked about the business, his responses were curt. "It's fine," he'd say, with no enthusiasm. When I pressed further, he snapped, "You wouldn't understand. You're just at home, you don't know anything about this." I was stunned by his words but tried convincing myself he was just tired. That night, he ate in silence and went straight to bed. This behavior became routine. Soon, he started having dinner out, claiming it was for work. I'd wait for him, skipping my own meals, but he'd return late, offering no explanation. Lately, he didn't even bother making excuses. When I brought it up, he'd snap at me. He seemed like a stranger, and I felt like nothing more than a servant in my own home. I often cried, thinking about how we struggled together to build his business. Now, I felt beneath his employees. I'd sacrificed my career as an illustrator to support his dream, but any gratitude he once had was long gone. To cope, I turned to my illustrations, losing myself in them while he was out. Posting online became my escape, and the growing support from followers lifted my spirits. One day, Bob commented, "Hope we can collaborate again someday." That simple message gave me strength. As our dinners stopped altogether, the distance between us grew. I began suspecting he was seeing someone else. Then, one day, I found perfume on his jacket, a scent I knew wasn't his. When I asked about it, he smirked and brushed it off, saying it was from an acquaintance. His indifference broke something in me. For the first time, my sadness turned into pure anger. I was exhausted from feeling mocked and isolated, trapped at home doing nothing but housework. Each day, the fear of being left behind by the world grew stronger. When I tried to open up, my friends only said they envied me, and my parents dismissed it as a luxury problem. I felt completely alone in my struggle. One night, my husband came home drunk. As I helped him to bed, I noticed a lipstick mark on his shirt. There was no way he could have come home like that by accident. It felt like a taunt from the other woman. Finally, I had undeniable proof of his infidelity. The next day, I confronted him, holding up the shirt. Where were you last night? And what's this lipstick mark? I demanded. He looked at the mark, surprised, but remained calm. I was at a bar with friends. It must have happened there, he said nonchalantly. For that to happen, you'd have had to take off your jacket. Didn't you notice? I pressed. I don't remember, he muttered, and then, without warning, he slapped me across the face. The sting burned, and I staggered back in shock, unable to process what had just happened. When will you understand? He shouted. Who do you think is providing for us? He stormed off, leaving me there, sitting in stunned silence. The truth sank in, my husband had changed. He no longer loved me. From that moment on, his behavior became even more hostile. If he didn't like a meal I made, he'd throw the plate on the floor in disgust. This tastes awful. Do you even know what I like? He would sneer. If you want to stay my wife, you need to improve your cooking. I'll eat out if this is what you're serving. Bad food affects my work. I tried to reason with him. Wait, I want to cook what you like, but you're never home, and you never talk to me. How am I supposed to make anything good if I don't know what you want? He clicked his tongue in irritation. Then let's get a divorce. I don't need you. I can live without you. But you can't live without me, can you? He looked at me with a mocking smirk. You're worthless, just a parasite who doesn't earn a dime. Something inside me snapped. I realized the man I once loved was gone, and he would never change. Then I'll get a job, I said, my voice steady with determination. What? He scoffed, surprised. I'll become financially independent, I replied, unwavering. He burst out laughing, clutching his stomach in mockery. Who would hire someone as powerless as you? He mocked. I swallowed my anger, knowing that lashing out would only give him more power. I couldn't fight him physically, but I would find another way to fight back. Fine, do as you please, he said, dismissing me, but don't neglect the housework. I won't accept you slacking off just because you're making a few pennies. With that, he stormed out. Right away, I began to take action. I hired a private investigator to gather evidence of my husband's infidelity. Before long, I had a collection of photographs, shots of him with various women, drinking, and even entering hotels with them. It wasn't just one woman. He was using his newfound wealth to date multiple women, each more flashy than the last. As I reviewed the photos and the investigator's report, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt anger or sadness. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. His blatant behavior had made it easy to gather the proof I needed. A week later, I found myself at a restaurant on the top floor of a hotel, meeting with Bob. I had dressed in the best clothes I could find, though I still felt underdressed compared to the other patrons. I approached the reserved table where Bob was already sitting. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, I said, offering a polite smile. Bob looked up and smiled warmly. Not at all, Karen. I've been looking forward to seeing you. Waiting is no trouble. Bob had been one of the biggest supporters of my husband and me when we first started our business. Now, he was the president of my husband's parent company. Thank you again for everything you did when we decided to go independent, I said, grateful for his early support. Bob nodded thoughtfully. I was surprised when you both made the leap, but given our history, it was no trouble at all to help. The company seems to be doing well, thanks to you. His expression softened for a moment, then turned serious. But today, we're here because you accepted my invitation, correct? He asked, offering me a warm smile. Yes, I replied, sitting up straighter, meeting his gaze. Bob had always admired my illustrations, and his investment in the business had partly been because of my involvement. He was also the only one who had ever truly advised me not to give up my career for a life as a homemaker. We had lost touch over the years, but recently he had found me on social media and left a comment on one of my posts. From there, we began exchanging emails and texts. "You've always had an appreciation for my illustrations, haven't you?" I asked, looking at him closely. I once told him, "I'm so glad you're still drawing. I'm a fan of your work," he replied. Bob even offered to hire me as an illustrator, but I turned him down at the time, feeling too tied to my household duties. However, he didn't give up. He kept reaching out, encouraging me to join him. A week ago, after yet another difficult conversation with my husband, I finally decided to take Bob up on his offer. During our meeting, Bob hesitated before speaking seriously. "I hate to bring this up, but Michael's company has developed quite a bad reputation," he said. "Really?" I was stunned. Michael had always made it sound like everything was going smoothly. Bob explained, "As the business has grown, the quality has dropped, deadlines are being missed, and mistakes are piling up. Even worse, Michael doesn't seem to care." "Is this common knowledge?" I asked, still in disbelief. "Yes," he nodded. "As the company expanded, people started noticing, but now it's the wrong kind of attention. There are even rumors that Michael's involved with some questionable characters." I was shocked. I had never known that side of my husband. Bob then changed the subject, trying to lighten the mood. "Anyway, from now on, you'll be doing illustrations for us directly. No need for outsourcing. That's a big win for our company. And don't worry, we'll make sure it doesn't interfere with your family life," he reassured me. So, I started working for Bob, doing illustrations remotely from home. It felt incredible to draw professionally again. What had once been a hobby now became a fulfilling career, and I loved every moment of it. Though balancing my work with household responsibilities was a challenge at times, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. As my income grew, I began to realize that I could support myself if I ever needed to. One day, while I was in the middle of a project, I heard the door slam loudly. I rushed to see what was going on and found my husband storming toward me, his eyes filled with fury. "You traitor!" he shouted. At first, I couldn't understand why he was so angry. I never thought my own wife would steal my clients. He fumed, his voice filled with anger. It didn't take long for me to realize that my recent work must have been cutting into his business. Since I started collaborating with Bob, he'd introduced me to several other companies, many of which happened to be my husband's business partners. In a way, this was my silent revenge for how he'd treated me. It must have felt humiliating for him to see me, the wife he'd once belittled, now taking away his contracts. "You don't have the right to say anything to me," I said coolly, my tone steady. "I'm just doing my job, just like you said I could." His face grew redder, but I didn't flinch. "Go ahead. Hit me if you want," I said firmly, "but then I'll call the police." The mention of the police caused him to hesitate, his anger momentarily dissipating. "My company is failing because of you. What are you trying to do to me?" he demanded, his voice shaking with frustration. "That's not my problem," I replied, walking to the other room where I'd kept the divorce papers. I handed them to him with a sense of finality. "We're not husband and wife anymore." "You're kidding, right?" he sneered. "You're divorcing me because my company is struggling? You're just a gold digger." "I could have left you long ago," I said calmly, "but I waited for the right moment. Now I'm working, earning my own money, and I don't need a thing from you." "Wait," he pleaded, his voice suddenly desperate. "Let's talk about the company before we talk about divorce. We built it together, didn't we?" "You kicked me out of that company," I reminded him. I have nothing to do with it anymore, but I'll make sure I get the compensation I deserve." He glared at me, his frustration evident as he bit his lip. "How greedy can you be? You're asking for money when you're the one divorcing me? Do you know how many times you hit me?" I asked softly. "And how openly you cheated on me? I have all the proof I need to claim compensation." I pulled out the photos the detective had gathered, watching his face fall as he saw the evidence. He sank to his knees in defeat. "Please," he begged. "The company is already failing. I can't handle both a divorce and paying you compensation. I need your support." When everything started falling apart, everyone left me, except for you. I didn't respond to his pleas. I walked out of the house with nothing but my work supplies and a change of clothes. The next time I returned was just to gather the rest of my belongings after the divorce was finalized. By then, his company had lost all its clients, and he was left begging for help. Meanwhile, I started my new life on my own, happily earning a living from my art. My illustrations grew in popularity, and I became successful in my own right. Now, I live a good life, always remembering the lessons learned from my past. My ex-husband became a reminder of what I never wanted to be: greedy, selfish, and broken.